Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first webinar of the year, which is on voluntary sustainability reporting with VSME. Please note that this session is being recorded. Now, I'd like to introduce our two presenters. Thilo Marenbach is an audit partner at Ecovis KSO in Germany. His expertise includes audit and assurance services, financial statements and group audits, with a strong focus on sustainability and sustainability reporting. And Simona Reggiani is a tax partner at Ecovis Lex in Italy. Simona's primary focus is on national and international corporate and tax law, with a strong interest in ESG matters, particularly in relation to new sustainability reporting obligations for small and medium entities. I'll hand over now to Thilo and we will get started.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Katie. I will start with the first part of our webinar. I will be talking about the general overview, or I'll give you a general overview of the VSME standard. And after this introductory part, my colleague Simona will talk about the cross-cutting standards of the VSME reporting standards. So, Katie, unfortunately, I cannot control the slides. If you could, yeah, now it should be, yes. Okay, so here we go. So this is an overview of the development of the VSME standard. So VSME stands for Voluntary Standard for Sustainability Reporting by SMEs, small and medium entities. The EU Commission commissioned the EFRAG to develop a voluntary sustainability reporting standard in September 2023. And EFRAG published a first draft of a VSME standard and also an LSME standard, so for listed small and medium entities in 2024. This was adopted by EFRAG in November 2024, and the official publication of the VSME standard, along with the cost-benefit analysis for entities to adopt the standard, was published in December 2024. In late 2024 and in early 2025, there was a huge discussion about the CSRD and about the ESRS standards, that this might be a highly regulating standard and too much bureaucracy for entities in the European Union. So a competitive compass was publicized, and along with that, the omnibus package, which introduced major changes to the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive in the European Union. And that also has an effect on the voluntary standard for sustainability reporting, which I will come to later. So what we have now in place, or what is now published, is the VSME standard as of November 2024. This has been designed under the impression of the old CSRD and the old thresholds for entities that fall under the CSRD and have to report under the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. So originally, the VSME standard was intended to be complied with by smaller entities. And now we have the Omnibus initiative in place, which is affecting smaller companies by reducing the scope of the affected companies, reduction of the ESRS, and the VSME standard is or should be a basis for a new reporting standard for voluntary reporting, that should be later on adopted as a delegated act. So it's not in place at the moment. It has been issued, but the EU has not finally adopted it. And it's likely that the VSME standard will be amended or changed because the initial user group for the standard was smaller entities, and now the omnibus package came into place um, raised several thresholds that only larger corporations will have to adopt the ESRS, and therefore it's likely that the VSME as we have it today will be changed in the future. But for now, we can only talk about the VSME standard that is in place and give you an overview over that. So the user group for reporting in accordance with VSME is smaller entities. And as I said before, the European Union issued a cost-benefit analysis. And this cost-benefit analysis says that companies that will use the VSME standard will be two types of companies. It will be companies that are either requested to provide sustainability information, or that are companies that in general would like to issue such information for their stakeholders and are called spontaneous users. And in the thinking of the European Union, the VSME user group will expand over time. And so the EU Commission is expecting that the VSME standard will be, let's say, a well-spread standard among European companies. The objective of the VSME standard is, first of all, to provide information that meets the data requirements of large companies that demand sustainability information from their suppliers, to provide information that meets the data needs of banks and investors, and thereby facilitating companies to access finance, to improve the treatment of sustainability issues that companies have to deal with, for example, environmental and social challenges such as pollution, worker health, and safety. And this will support their competitive growth in the short, medium, and long term and lengthen their resilience, to contribute to a sustainable and more inclusive economy, and a consistency with the ESRS, which is designed for large companies, and to provide proportionate requirements for smaller entities. The scope of application for the VSME standard, so who has to or who is intended to use the VSME standard, is that it is used voluntarily and applies to entities that are not listed on regulated markets within the European Union. And it is originally intended for entities that do not exceed the two of these thresholds: 25 million in total assets, 50 million euros in net turnover, or an average of 250 employees. And these organizations are originally outside the scope of the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, but are encouraged to adopt the voluntary reporting, covering the same sustainability issues as the European Sustainability Reporting Standards for large undertakings. And the VSME standard considers the unique needs of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises through proportionate requirements. And this is where let's say the mix-up or the current mix-up with the omnibus comes into place, because the omnibus package introduced higher thresholds, and therefore the VSME standards as it is designed now is likely to be amended, as it was originally intended only for these smaller entities who not exceed these thresholds in the slide. The VSME comprises of two modules that serve as the basis for preparing the sustainability report. There's a basic module, and then there's a second module, in addition, the comprehensive module. The basic module is the basis for sustainability reporting. It's prerequisite for applying the comprehensive module. So if you want to provide information under this standard, you have to use the basic module first. And it's the targeted approach for micro enterprises and minimum requirement for other companies. And it contains mandatory disclosures. So disclosures that have to be made if you want to comply with VSME, optional disclosures, and also says there are, if applicable, disclosures. So that means disclosures that only have to be made if this standard or if this information is relevant for the company preparing its reporting under the standard. The comprehensive module supplements the basic module with additional disclosure requirements and data points. It contains key figures required by financial market participants, as well as other key figures that are important for banks, investors, and corporate customers. And it also includes mandatory disclosures as like the basic module, mandatory disclosures, optional disclosures, and also, if applicable, disclosures. It is important that reporting is carried out either exclusively with under the basic module, or if you want to give further information, that you use the basic module and the comprehensive module. The principles for preparing the sustainability report under the VSME can be divided into fundamentals and guidelines. The fundamentals are that the standard sets requirements for disclosure of short, medium, and long-term actual or potential positive or negative impacts on people or the environment, and how environmental and social aspects have affected or could affect its financial position, performance, and cash flow in the short, medium, and long term. The company must provide relevant, truthful, comparable, understandable, and verifiable information in its report. And the company may supplement this information of the basic module and the additional module with additional qualitative or quantitative information if applicable. So these are the fundamentals for the reporting under the VSME standard. And the guidelines say, first of all, compliance with the standard, comparative information has to be given except for key figures reported for the first time. And you have to follow the if applicable principle. So if a standard states that information, for example, for the usage of water has to be provided, you have to do this if this is applicable for you. The date and place of publication and consolidation. The report has to be prepared annually and has to cover the same reporting period as the annual financial statements. The publication can take place in the management report or as a separate report. And it's recommended to prepare the sustainability report as the parent company on a consolidated basis. So if we are talking about a group of companies, the parent company, the ultimate parent, should be the one preparing the report on a consolidated basis. Confidential and sensitive information, there has to be a consistency and a linkage between the financial statements and the sustainability reporting. This is a principle that can also be linked to the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which is aimed to rather than having a financial and a non-financial reporting, to switch to a corporate reporting, which includes financial and non-financial information, which is sustainability information. The disclosure of confidential or sensitive information may be omitted if this is indicated under B1 section of the VSME standard. Information in the VSME report must correspond to the information in the financial statements. So if you take a look at the financial information and take a look at the sustainability information, it has to be in line with one another. It cannot be contradictory. Relationships are presented or are to be presented in a comprehensible manner using appropriate cross-references. So you have to prepare a report, a sustainability report that is linkable to your financial reporting. So what are mandatory, if applicable, and optional details? Mandatory information is supplemented by if applicable and optional information. And one example for mandatory information is that companies have to report, for example, their CO2 emissions, but only scope 1 and scope 2 information. Certain disclosures apply only if in specific circumstances. The VSME standard specifies such circumstances, and the information that is to be reported only if the circumstances are considered applicable by the company. If one of these disclosures is omitted, it is assumed that it is not applicable. So if you read about it, it is if you do not find certain information in the sustainability report that is prepared under the VSME standard, the user can assume that this information is not relevant. It's not the subject is not applicable to this company. And one example is if the undertaking has production processes in place which significantly consume water, it shall disclose its water consumption, calculated as the difference between its water withdrawal and water discharge from its production processes. And for example, if the undertaking employs 50 or more employees, it shall disclose the employee turnover rate for the reporting period. And if this information is not there, the user can assume the entity does not use significantly or consume water significantly and has less than 50 employees. And voluntary and additional information, one example is biodiversity. The company shall disclose the number and area of sites that it owns, has leased, or manages in or near a biodiversity sensitive area. And the undertaking may disclose metrics related to land use, like total use of land. And this also applies only if it's applicable, and if it's not stated, it is not there. The design and structure of the basic module is that there is two cross-cutting standards, which Simona will be talking about, which provide general information. Then there are environmental standards like B3, energy and greenhouse gas emissions, air, water and soil pollution, biodiversity, water, resource use, circular economy. There are social indicators, workforce general characteristic, workforce health and safety, and compensation, collective bargaining and training, and governance, convictions and fines for corruption and bribery. And this is a design that basically follows the ESRS, where you also have the setting of general information and then information that is provided alongside with E, S, and G, environmental, social, and governance. So, and the, just a second, one slide too far. So the comprehensive module also includes general information, C1 and C2 standard that Simona will talking about as well. And then there's also environmental indicators, for example, greenhouse gas reduction targets and transition for climate protection, climate-related risks. Social indicators are additional general characteristics of the workforce, guidelines for respecting human rights and related processes, serious incidents related to human rights, and for governance, revenue from certain activities and exemption from EU reference values, gender diversity in the governing body. Yeah, and this was the basic overview of the VSME standard. And I now hand over to Simona.
Okay, so thank you, Tilo. So welcome everyone, and thank you for attending this webinar today. My name is Simona Reggiani, and I'm an Ecovis partner in Italy. Today, I will present an initial introduction to the VSME standard. So in this section of the webinar, we will delve into the substance of the VSME standard. We will examine the content of paragraphs B1 and B2 of the basic module, but also the C1 and C2 of the comprehensive module. So these introductory sections of the sustainability report cover general so-called cross-cutting information. But just to let you know, so we will be running a separate webinar in which we will focus specifically on the environmental, social, and governance aspects, which are covered both in the basic and comprehensive module. And we will have the chance to go into those topics in much more depth together. So today we will just speak to the cross-cutting information. So here, this is the first slide. So let me check again. Okay, so here we are. So here in this slide, you can see the link to this valuable resource. It's the Knowledge Hub. So this is a very important source because it is very useful to provide you with essential tools for anyone wishing to approach voluntary reporting under the VSME framework. In December 2025, IFRAG launched this comprehensive online knowledge hub. So as Steve explained before, IFRAG is the body which is responsible for developing the European Sustainability Reporting Standard. And this platform offers a wealth of resources for those seeking to deepen their understanding of sustainability reporting. Within the Knowledge Hub, there is a dedicated section for the VSME standard. In this section, you can interactively explore not only the standard itself, but also the accompanying guidance, which is particularly helpful for grasping the details of the standard. So here in this slide to this. So now on to build. Is a detail as our company should publish information on the VSME option used to prepare the sustainability report. As Tilo said before, you can choose from option A, which is basic module, or option B, which is basic module plus a comprehensive module. Then you should provide company-specific information. So, what is your legal form of your company? What is the NACE sector classification code? So, based on the activity of your company, which is the amount of your total assets, the amount of the total revenues, and then the number of employees, and also the headquarters and location of significant assets, and also the geolocation of sites, not only the sites which are of property of the company, but also the sites which are leased or managed by the company. Then, if your company has received sustainability certification or label, this should be briefly described in this B1 section. And also, if the sustainability report is a consolidated one, you should also indicate the scope of consolidation. So, the standard also provide some clarifications regarding the information we have just seen. So when you provide the number of employees, you can provide the number as an head count or as an FTE. When you provide a number as an head count, the head count is the total number of people which is employed by your company at the end of the reporting period or as an average. As an alternative, you can provide the number of employees as FTE. FTE means full-time equivalent. So you can calculate this number by dividing the employees' scheduled hours, so the total effective hours worked in a week, by the number of hours for a full-time work week. So if you have an employee who works 25 hours every week, and in your company the full-time week is 40 hours, this employee represents 0.625 FTE, which is 25 divided 40. Then another important information is the geolocation of sites. Why? Because geolocation is a very valuable data point for stakeholders, because stakeholders can assess the risks and opportunities which are connected to your company, and especially in relation to environmental aspects, for example, climate change adaptation, water, ecosystems, and biodiversity. So this was B1. Then we have C1. So if you have chosen to report under comprehensive module, not only the basic, let me go back to the previous slide. I don't know what. Okay. So before we saw the B1, now we have the C1. So if you have chosen option B, so to report not only on the basic model, but also on the comprehensive model, according to paragraph C1, you should also include an explanation of business model and strategy. So you should cover aspects such as what are the key products or services which are offered by your company, which are the principal markets. So if your company is a wholesale or retail company, for example, what are the main business relationships? So the key suppliers, the customers, the distribution channels, for example. And then after you have described your business model, then you can describe your strategy, but what aspects related to your strategy? The sustainability aspects, okay? So if you have any strategic elements which impact sustainability, they can be reported in this specific section. Now we can move on B2. Okay, so B2 is one of the most important section of the sustainability report under the VSME, if not the principal one. This section is very important because it addresses practices, policies, and future initiatives aimed at facilitating the transition toward a more sustainable economy. So these topics are covered in section B2 of the basic module, but also in the section C2 of the comprehensive module. According to the basic module, so paragraph B2, if the company has put in place specific practices, policies, or future initiatives for transitioning toward a more sustainable economy, it shall state so in this section. But it will also disclose if these practices, policies, or future initiatives are publicly available, and if there are any targets which are associated to these policies, practices, or initiatives. So the standard also provide some description of what practices, policies, initiatives, and targets are. So as you can see in the slide, so practices may include, for instance, reducing water electricity use, limiting GHG emissions, or forming partnerships on sustainability, and so on. Policies are instead frameworks. They are frameworks of objectives and also frameworks of management principles which guide decisions on sustainability issues. So each policy assigns responsibility, defines the scope, and sets objectives, and these objectives should also be linked to measurable targets. The policy is carried out through actions or plans, and often the SMEs, the small medium entities, do not have policies which are formalized, but even though you have policies that are unwritten, you will have to formalize them in your sustainability report and where in the B2 section, okay? Then you have future initiatives. Future initiatives refer to ongoing plans addressing sustainability. And finally, targets. Targets are goals, okay? So they are specific, measurable, time-bound sustainability goals, which are set by the small medium entity on a voluntary basis or due to legal requirements. So now we can move to C2. Okay. So C2, as I said before, if you have chosen to report based not only on the basic model but also on the comprehensive model, you should also provide the information which are set by C2. So you should do more than simply confirm whether you have sustainability practices, policies, initiatives, or targets in place and whether these are publicly available. But you are also required to provide description of these specific measures. So furthermore, if your organization has designated a particular employee at a senior level to oversee the implementation of these policies, practices, and initiatives, this information may also be included in this section. So here I have prepared a slide with a table here just to give you, okay, a more precise picture of this kind of information, B2 plus C2. So this table provides a practical overview of the information required by the two paragraphs of the standard. So as you can see, specifically, paragraph B2 asks the company to simply answer yes or no to 3 questions. So the first question is, do you have existing practices, policies, future initiatives that address any of the following sustainability issues? And here the answer will be yes or no. Then the second question is, are these policies, practices, initiatives publicly available? And here again, the reply will be yes or no. The third question is, do these policies, practices, initiatives have any targets? And here again, the reply will be yes or no. The sustainability issues which are listed by the standard, and you can see in the slide, are the following. So you have climate change, pollution, water and marine resources, biodiversity ecosystems, circular economy. And these aspects are related to environment, okay? Then you have workforce, workers in the value chain, affected community, consumers and end users, which are topics related to social aspects. Finally, you have business conduct, which is governance. So you have environment, social, and governance aspects. And for each of these topics, you will have to reply to the 3 questions I said before. So here, this simplified approach makes it easy to quickly assess the organization level of attention to each of these areas. Then, if the comprehensive model has been chosen, it will also be necessary to provide a detailed description of the practices, policies, and initiatives, as well as a description of the associated targets. Finally, you must also state the qualification of the personnel responsible for the proper implementation of these policies. So this table is a concrete tool to make the company's sustainability journey clear and verifiable. So it's worth noting that in many cases, this set of information is actually quite straightforward to obtain, because a lot of organizations, even though they are small, already have practices, policies, initiatives, and targets in place, whether to meet regulatory requirements, whether to manage risks, or simply to reflect their core business value. So here again, in the next slide, I will show you another link here to another resource. This resource is the VSME Supporting Guide on Disclosure C2, the comprehensive model, what we have just looked in the previous slides. So Here again, this guide is freely available on the IFRAG website, and it has been developed by IFRAG. You can access it directly using the link which is shown on this slide. Okay, so here in the next slide, we will take a look of this guide. So the supporting guide is structured into two main interactive sections, so section 1 and section 2. The first section provides a range of examples, which are organized by increasing complexity. This example illustrate practices, policies, future initiatives on sustainability, okay? And they are specifically tailored for small and medium entities, the SMEs. Using the guide is straightforward because after selecting your topic of interest, you will be presented with a series of descriptive examples which are grouped by subtopics. So you have topics, subtopics, and for each topic and subtopic, you have examples. The topics you can choose from are the same ones we discussed earlier when we were commenting on the table that forms the basis for providing information required by the standard regarding policies, practices, and future initiatives. So, as I said before, you have climate change, pollution, water, marine resources, biodiversity, circular economy, which refer to environmental aspects, then own workforce, workers in the value chain, affected communities, consumers and end users, which relate to social aspects, and finally, business conduct. So here I will show you an example. Climate change. So when you select the topic climate change, so one of the topic I listed before, you can choose the subtopic, so for example, low carbon transport. With reference to low carbon transport, the examples provided by the guide are, so the first one is providing low emission infrastructures or incentives for employees' daily commuting. So there is also a concrete example, so e-bike storage, public transport passes, remote work options. Then a second example is replacing a company vehicle and machinery, for example the work lifts, with electric or low emission alternatives and providing on-site electric vehicle charging. So as demonstrated by these examples, the guideline help you easily find the policies, practices, and future initiatives which are relevant for your specific company. So if you take a look to the guide, there are a lot of examples. Here we can see the second section of the guide. The second section, so the first one, there are the examples listed by topic, subtopics. Then we have the second section with the case studies. There are 5 case studies. Each case study is built upon the examples provided in the first section. And these case studies span different business sectors and offer examples for both small enterprises with around 12 employees and medium enterprises with around 200 employees. The case studies demonstrate how organizations might practically report C2 related information. So the sectors for these case studies have been selected to reflect the distribution of the main SME sector within the EU. And this is done to ensure relevance and applicability to a wide range of businesses. So the main sectors which are represented by the case studies are food and beverage, manufacturing, agriculture, construction, e-commerce. And to give you a practical sense of what the case studies actually look like, we will see a few examples from case study number 5, which is all about an online retail company. So this particular case study, I think that it is relevant for us today because it really reflects a business model that's both common and rapidly expanding across Europe. In fact, the e-commerce sector now makes up 18% of the overall SME market in Europe. So here in the next slide, okay, you can see the case study number 5, as I said before. It is organized into 2 parallel sections. The first relates to small entities. The second is dedicated to medium-sized entities. So this split allows us to highlight the differences in approach and level of detail between organizations of different sizes. So, as you can see from this case study, when we look at the small business, its context is really shaped by customer trust. The company relies heavily on building that trust, employs staff on a flexible basis, and is especially motivated to cut down or return packages by engaging directly with customers through its e-commerce platform. In contrast, the medium-sized business operates a rapidly expanding e-commerce platform, delivering a high volume of packages. It positions itself as a sustainable delivery service and, just like the smaller company, places a strong emphasis on reducing returns and actively connecting with customers to achieve this. Now that we have outlined the context for both the small and medium-sized businesses, the case study goes on to highlight the key sustainability topics where these companies have already implemented practices, policies, initiatives. In particular, the areas covered include climate change, circular economy, own workforce, consumers and end users, and business conduct. So here, again, in the case study number 5, if we go, okay, in the next slide, you can see that for each sustainability topic, the case study provides practical examples of the practices, policies, and initiatives adopted by the company. So in the case of the small enterprise, the guide describes simple and easily achievable actions, while for medium-sized businesses, it includes additional descriptions, which are highlighted in blue, that offer a deeper insight into the strategies and steps taken, reflecting the greater complexity of such companies. So, if you take the example of business conduct, the practices highlighted by both the small and the medium entity is maintain regular online meetings where team members can share feedback, celebrating successes, and contribute ideas to strengthen a positive and inclusive corporate culture. Then you can see that the medium entity also adds that it organizes 2 team building activities per year to foster connection between employees and leadership, and this is done to ensure that the leadership team remains approachable and accessible. So, another slide again on case study number 5. So before we wrap up on case study number 5, it's important to mention that the guide also includes some clear examples of practical targets. So not only practices, policies, initiatives, but also targets. For instance, on sustainability goals set by the medium-sized company, one of these goals focuses on low carbon deliveries. So specifically, the aim here is to offer 100% carbon-free delivery services in cities that have low emission zones by 2030. Of course, the company anticipates a moderate rise in leasing and contracting costs to achieve this target, but the precise figures have been left out due to their sensitive nature, so this is a possibility you can apply. So this structure makes case study number 5 a practical and immediately useful tool for any organization working in the e-commerce sector wishing to develop its own sustainability disclosures. There are concrete solutions suitable for both small and medium-sized businesses. Okay, so now we are back to the conclusions. Okay, I have a problem with the slide. Okay, as we reach the end of this session, so some final consideration. Here, the question with which I would end my section of the webinar. So the question is, what will the future VSME standard bring? As Tilo mentioned earlier, the European Commission is narrowing down the mandatory sustainability reporting requirements. And so only large businesses with more than 1,000 employees would be included. So for those companies with up to 1,000 employees, the idea is to introduce a voluntary reporting standard which would be based on the VSME framework created by IFRAG and would come into play through a delegated act. Just to clarify, as Tilo highlighted at the start of this webinar, the current VSME standard is actually meant for organizations with up to 250 employees, not all the way up to 1,000. So, if the voluntary standard is taken up by companies with between 250 and 1,000 employees, it's likely that what they will be required to report could end up looking a bit different from what the European Commission is currently recommending. All of this, of course, depends on the ongoing discussions between the EU co-legislators. Additionally, there will be a strengthening of the value chain cap, expanding protection to all companies with up to 1,000 employees, not just the SMEs with up to 250 employees. Just to remind you, what is the value chain cap? So as you can see in the slide, companies subject to reporting requirement should not make any data requests to companies not subject to reporting requirements beyond those specifying the new VSME. So only industry-specific sustainability information may be requested beyond the new VSME. So also the trickle-down effect will be affected by the new VSME. This means a protection of companies outside the scope of application of the CSRD from excessive information requirements by CSRD reporting companies. So in the interim, until the future adapted or new VSME is adopted, the European recommendation serves as a temporary solution to help SME respond to increasing information requests from financial institutions, large companies, and other stakeholders. So the European Commission encourages SMEs to use the VSME standard for publishing sustainability information and urges those requesting such information to adopt this standard where possible, thereby reducing administrative burdens for SMEs. So now, before we conclude, I would like to invite Tilo to share some final thoughts on the next steps for organizations considering voluntary reporting under the VSME framework. So thank you so much for your attention so far. And Tilo, would you like to take the floor again and comment on the next slide?
Yeah, thank you, Simona. So for those companies that will likely or are sure that they will not fall under the scope of the CSRD, here are some hints of for actions that they could take. First of all, review the existing ESG data requests that they receive from stakeholders, for example, from investors, banks, customers, rating agencies, but also from their own workforce, for example, to evaluate if it's worthwhile to just provide this isolated information or to think about preparing a sustainability reporting, for example, using the VSME standard. If the answer is they would like to prepare such reporting, then to perform a gap analysis on a possible minimum set of quantitative indicators and disclosure requirements. So determine what are the mandatory information that has to be given. Third, review assessment of the collection of necessary ESG data across all subsidiaries and locations. So are you able to provide this information in order to prepare your reporting? Fourth, clarification of responsibility and establishment of clear ESG governance in connection with the business and risk strategy. So let's say start to prepare for ESG governance and for ESG reporting by determining who is responsible for ESG topics within the company. And fifth, the implementation of a process to ensure a robust database and data collection in order to be able to to comply with the VSME standard once the decision has been made that that a reporting will be made. Yeah. So thank you so far from my side, and I guess I hand it over to Katie.